Welcome to SmallTalk by seforim Chatter. I'm Nachi Weinstein. On this episode of SmallTalk, I'm going to be joined once again by Rabbi Aryeh Ganz, who is the mechaber of the Sefer Aryeh Hatorah, or more Malaket, editor, put together that volume. I did a podcast episode a few years ago with Rabbi Shemanowitz, Mechon Al Yisayas, and Rabbi Aryeh has now published two big, large volumes of a new, basically a new set called Adirei Hatorah. No relation to Adirei Hatorah, which will be coming up soon, but I think this is a fortuitous time to be publishing a sefer called Adirei Hatorah. And it's a very similar style, a collection of various different, very interesting things and seforim al Torah, and we'll talk about it here on the episode. Thank you, Aryeh, for joining me once again.
Thank you so much for having me, and your podcast is amazing. I've got tons of feedback. Just 3 weeks ago, I got an email someone sent me from a podcast 3 years ago. He wanted to know something that we talked about. So, and we miss Shimon Shemanowitz, who did an absolutely amazing job, and we could really use Mark Shapiro here also, because this sefer was so severely censored, I guess. But there's still, don't worry, there's still plenty of good stuff inside.
As we'll get to. But as I told you when we discussed this off the air, it's rather censorship because the Machon, the editors told you to take stuff out, but you, at the end of the day, signed off on it. So, even if they maybe pressured you. But we'll get to that, and the listeners will hear about it. And those familiar with Aryeh Levanon will already know what style you're going for in Adirei Hatorah. But what can you tell the listeners about this new sefer, this new set, Adirei Hatorah?
Okay, so this is, Aryeh Levanon was, Baruch Hashem, a tremendous success. It's completely sold out. Maybe we'll reprint it soon. It's been quoted by everyone from Reb Ephraim Goldberg to Rabbi Saul Reisman to Melech Biderman to Kolmavas. You name it, we got it. And many Chashuv Rabbanim use it. But this new one just really takes the cake. Like, the bar is so much higher. When you get a sefer, so let's say you buy a halacha sefer. So how much is it of it is actually new, like interesting material? Here, every single thing, there's no wasted space. It's all pure Torah, fascinating material. And the people who saw it it just came out, and right away people grabbed it. And I put it in Bismedrash over Shabbos. People told me there was no Shema Yimashech. It's Vada Yimashech. People, Shavuos night, we're doing this. Baruch Hashem, when we were doing it in Al Yisayas, all the workers were crowded around the desk. So I showed it to Tzal Davlitsky, many of you know from it's a Chachma forum. He was blown away. So Baruch Hashem. So it's really likut, primarily Torah, but there's many, interesting things in there. The primary thing, I guess we could call it, and let's start with the learning, is that the Torah Tamima did an amazing job. He took all the Chazals and put them al Seder Psukim. So over here, what we did was we took everything from after Chazal. I'll give you drashas that anywhere from the Ga'inim to the Achreinim made, and also Pshutei Shal Mikra, what they learned from Pasuk. I'll give you an example. This actually, Rabbi Shemanowitz showed me. You'll see why. The Pasuk in Parshas Noach says, V'hinei Ali Zayis Taraf B'fiyah. Rashi says that Mizanesa, quoting the Gemara, Mizanesa should be Miroirin Kazayas. Zok the Shach in Yerdea Tzadivav, you see from here that Zayis is Davar Charif. So things like that. Here also, in this week is Parshas Nasai. We brought down the Binas Adam, which is the Chai Adam. He brings that from a Chayker Echad in the Sefer Abris that Chaymetz is a problem. It's infested with worms. So he says it can't be. Mashakasav lesser Chaymetz Hevelhu. Shriat Torah Amra Benazir Chaymetz Yayim Klal Dachrini Shari. So there's countless such things, and it makes a really interesting read.
Besides for the many pshatim that you quote just regularly could say for, and that's something in general that I think you already explained this, but if you want to clarify a little bit more for the listeners, because I've been asked this since we did the last episode, and people talk about it, say Aryeh Levanon, there's many likas from Talieris and Lekach Toiv and Sholarav and Sholiexer, etc. Many people are very, very familiar with likut seforim al Torah, especially in our generation and the previous, it's become more popular. So what sets aside Aryeh Levanon and Adirei Hatorah? What makes this? I mean, you already talked about some of the uniqueness and some of the unique sources that you quote, and we'll talk some more. But if you could just explain, what it is that you do on a parsha by parsha basis that explains what your program is in Aryeh Levanon and Adirei Hatorah.
So first of all, the stuff are not taken from previous malaktim. And actually, interestingly, I don't know why I get asked a lot. So you took it all from Eitzar Chachma? So first of all, that's a weird question. But second of all is absolutely not. If you look in Nakdama, we talk about the interesting way of describing the Sefer Yalomit. We try to balance between yeshivish and academic. But there's plenty of stuff that cannot be found in Eitzar Chachma at all. And there's also many, I guess you would call it, many like a little off the beaten track. I'll give you an example of something one of the editors was extremely strong that we should take out, but I felt absolutely not. This is an extremely important piece. The Chavis Yar, who was one of the biggest, he was brilliant in everything. He writes in his Sefer Mekar Chaim that how you should daven from a sitter, and he says, "B'didi havi ovda, sheyisi koyri b'chol yom parshas hamon v'akeda bal peh." And it was the second day of Rosh Hashanah when they lane the Parshas Hakeda. Hergashti sh'dalagti tamid mi'v'loi chasachta ad v'loi chasachta. I skipped out the mimeni. So this was years. And he says, from then on, I started doing from a sitter, and I realized also the Parshas Haman every day, I skipped out a pasuk also. So we have one of the most brilliant achronim describing, very practical, that if you don't do this, you're going to make a mistake. And I made a mistake. This is so just down to earth. And I think it's very, we have so many, and just when you the Chasam Sefer says that when you, today you can't really say Chedushim, he says. A lot of Mechaber bring this in the Akdama to the Sefer. What's all our Chedushim about? It's all like Hatzivi Lach Tziyunim. It's all to make it, to remember the actual Gemara. So when you bring down a story or something, it makes it so much more personal. We have a whole shtickle in Parshas Achrei about Chuppas Nida. So everyone knows the halacha. We bring down some interesting halachas you probably don't know. But then we also bring down from credited sources that the Satmarov and Ramesha Feinstein both had a chuppas nida. And not only that, we bring a whole piyut. This is not an Eitzar Chachma, by the way. We bring a whole exchange of piyutim back and forth from two great Rishonim who describe the chuppas nida by their chasna. So there's so many examples that make it very, very personal.
Right, and you have many regular, quote-unquote, standard sources I see here. I'm just flipping through. You quote a Prisha, you quote a Brach, you quote a Avudraham, a Levush, Moruk Sir Yaakov Emdin, Shamos Chaim, over Bischaim Sonnenfeld. You have Yeshel Avram Buchach. You have, you're quoting Yirgis Moshe, then you have the Rambam's medical works. You quote Magal Tov of the Chida. Right, you're quoting Shirei Chayil of the Ben Ezra. So it's all over, right? It's all different type of sources. So it's basically all over the place in a good way. That is just very, and you have stories and Torah, and you also have Pshatim and Pesukim also.
Right, and someone actually pointed out to me over Shabbos, someone who is mamash addicted to it, didn't leave him the whole Shabbos, that it's more than just quoting. When you read like a standardized sefer from Art Scroll or Zohar, when you see the name, okay, a name could be interesting. Here, just the way the name is quoted. Like, we quote a Shvagar of the Ramah, and we call him Maran Saratayra. So that like shoots you a little. Like, everything's very engaging. It's and especially we have with like stuff that should have been printed, shouldn't have been printed, plagiary. We have a shtickle from Reb David Tzvi Hillman who talks about there's a Cheshik Shleima. He says it shouldn't have been printed in Sukkah because the Cheshik Shleima made a mistake. All those type of stuff, and he was the Amudei Oyer had Charati, he printed his shtickle. Anything that has to do with that, and it makes you remember it more. Our goal is to be Mar B'Torah. So all these stuff you connect with. We're dealing with we have a world today that's so enticing. So we have to make the Torah more exciting also.
Now, something that we discussed in our last podcast in Aryeh Levanon, and I'm sure many listeners are waiting for me to ask this, and those that I get this from many people that really enjoy Aryeh Levanon, and something that we came up is the source issue, that you don't always source everything. But I will say that looking at Adirei Torah, it seems like a little bit better that it is sourced. For example, I'm looking at here, you're quoting something from Tzion. He says, Tavshin Lamed Vav, Chayvers Aleph, Omid 71. You have Dalias Yecheskel, Soif Chelik Beis, Kol Boy, Simon Samach Vav, Shal Zuruz Yechonios, Orchaim, Simon Yud Zayin. So I think he did improve the sourcing. Was that an effort to improve the sourcing a little bit over Aryeh Levanon, and you didn't always say exactly where it came from, each quote? Right.
Well, when you're dealing with Vertlach, let's say someone says something from Chaim Shmulevitz, so it's not as important. You want to know if it says it in the Sefer Darkei Yosef, so like it's not the end of the world. If you're quoting a Chacham Tzvi or a Shirei Chayil of Ben Ezra or a Ramesha Ben Ezra who quotes the Quran, and other Rishonim who bring down how they bring down how the Kadmonim, when they would want to know a pshat in the pasuk, they would actually look in the Quran to see it. All these stuff, it has to be very clearly documented. You're dealing with or when you're bringing, I have a very interesting piece on everyone knows Reb Shach was very against the Rambam Yemi of Chabad. So I have a letter from I bring down Reb Shach's letter, and that Tzemach Tzedek also has a very similar letter. Not to mean that we're especially anti-Chabad. We bring that everyone together. There's a piece in Parshas Bereishis that has against evolution. That first it brings the Lubavitcher Rebbe of quoting his Litvish Rebbe in Cheder, and then it quotes Rabbi Yosef Zalman Bloch from Muncie. So we deal with all different. I guess a very cute var, if you're looking for one of those, is we bring from the Ali Tamar. I'm sure you're familiar. He says that Akavya b'Malalel, they were Seikel Saroinei, the Mishnah in Ediyah says, and they put him in Cherem. So he says, if you ever went to a Levaya in Yerushalayim, that long Yerushalmi with the yellow mustache, what does he say? Akavya b'Malalel imistakel b'shloisha dvorim. So that's Ki'ilu Klal Yisrael is asking Mechila from Akavya b'Malalel. So there's all different types of. We talk about the Shidduch crisis, what Rabbi Yerucham Levavitz, what he dealt with in. How he didn't want people to know that they got married, that the Hanhala wasn't behind getting married late. And as we said, we quote people interesting. Lamashal, Professor Isidore Torsky, he's quoted as Hagayin HaKadosh Rabbi Yitzchak Torsky, which may be a joke, but listen, the other things, the way other rabbis are quoted is also, everything is very b'midah v'mishkal v'msura. And it really makes a very fascinating read. Someone sent me about in Parshas Bereishis. We have a piece from the Kerem Shleimas, the Bavaver periodical. It's not available on Yitzhak Chachma. So the whole piece over there, how the fight between the Divrei Chaim and the Shalom Meshiv, by Shemus Gittin, if Hinda comes from the Shem Hashem. So one of them talks about Chas v'Shalom. How can you? The Shalom Meshiv says in the Divrei Chaim, Chas v'Shalom. How can you say a lady's name came from the Shem Hashem? And the Bav Rebbe from Bar Park said, I don't understand. He was able to talk about my grandfather like that. There's many interesting things to this effect.
You quote Rav Kook. You quote, I see here, Chai Yehuda B'Darei Madana in his autobiography. So you have things, various, many sources. I think Nishmas Chaim and Ashben Israel. You have Arugas Avoyis and Makadman, the Rishon. You quote from Reb Saji going, one of the new academic editions put out through Ben Tzvi. You quote.
That's a very interesting point. I just want to point out, as we mentioned, every shtickle is tried to be made interesting. So if you look this time, for technical reasons more, every pasuk was done with trap. But there's actually one shtickle. I don't believe you're going to find any other sefer for Shah Torah like this. There's a shtickle that the whole piece is trap. What's that? That's Reb Sadi Gaon in the Sefer Agaloi, or Giloi, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. He printed his sefer with trap. So the thing is with trap. Another example, we quote a Gilead Marsha from Shlomo Eger, Reb Kiva Eger's son, who it is actually a little hard to come by because it's in the back of Mechain Yerushalayim in the wrong volume, whatever. But over there, he talks about Shura Sadin. He discusses what Shura Sadin is in Chesh Mishpat. And he has a picture over there, like 2 lines, a Shura of a Din. So we try to do whatever, like to make it more hands-on. That's sort of the Mahalach over here.
You also, sometimes do something like this, where you say, and then right away, brackets, and then you tell you continue. We're not going to tell you what's going on. We're going to quote Chem. So you have these type of things. And also, just to get back to something you said about the Trop, so the way it works for the Sefer, anyone hasn't seen the Sefer, the structure is that you start off with each pasuk in bold. You have that, each pasuk in the beginning, and then you have in brackets next to where the pasuk is, Parak A, pasuk of Gimel, and then you'll have after it Kosav, whoever it is, or Shama, whatever, in bold from the end, what it is, and then at the end you'll say where we're coming from, where you're quoting from. Now getting back to the source also, but you don't have an index of all the Sfarim, all the Chacham quoted, right? I guess the index would be very large.
Right, it would be very large. Also, this is not like a university sponsoring. There's no fund for this. Funding was very hard. And also, this was not made in like the comfort of some whatever. At Kanai Nahara, we're talking about 5 little kids. The oldest is 4. This was made being diaper to diaper, I guess, making bottles. But we, I definitely think I find it hard to believe that someone wouldn't find it interesting. This week, if you look in the Hatorah about Shimshon, so we quote the Machzah Shimshon. That's I guess a historical novel from the Ramchal about the Ma'aseh Shimshon and many other. Right in the beginning in the Akdama,
it's a play, really. It's a Ma'aseh Shimshon. It's a play that he wrote. Yeah,
no, but he discusses a few years ago. There was a whole fight about Pshuta Shel Mikra. He discussed it. In his Akdama, I think I quote it there. He says how you could, how you're allowed to imagine that something happened. The pasuk very interesting, and actually in the end, right at the end of the akdama, I want to get the listeners to the readers to know that we're talking about like not your regular sefer. So I print a kapitel tilim of the Ramchal. You'll see it in like it's a little tinted over there, and of course we have to discuss the akdama. We're not going to have time for that, but and then a big har over there, all the places that say like Kimit Sarfas Teitze Torah and why you're allowed to do it today is a Schat Degula, because there's a lot is there Avir there Eretz Yisrael Machkim today in Eretz Yisrael. There's a lot of very interesting things.
Yeah, fascinating. Another fascinating thing that you talk about that I heard from Shimon Shemanowitz and I heard from Ali Zayas, and we discussed it, is you have a list of Gedolim that got divorced. How does that come into the Sefer? What's going on over there?
Okay, so there was a lot. Well, really, if you look, I'm not the first one to do it. It's a place at Torah. I did check it up. There is, it's very short. I took one of the Ma'amakimis from there. We have a giant. I don't think there's a divorced person in the world who should not see that. We have a lot of Rishonim about it. One of the Rebbes said that the reason why the Chavas Das and my grandfather, Shlomo Ganz, the kids of Shulchan Aruch, that why their seforim were neskabel, we bring this down, is because they had bad. Their wives were tough people, but we bring from the times of we bring down a Barbanel that says that none of the Gedolei Yisrael were praised because that they never got divorced. So we decided to compile a little list, and that's from Adam Rishon, who the Netziv says gave a get to Chava, all the way down till obviously no one alive today or even before that. But and there's so much to learn from it in many cases. You'll see how the Nesivas, we know, is because we bring down the Meichtachak, but Rabbi Kiveger was Masada the get. He didn't want to say Yaakov. He said Ge'oin Yaakov. One of the Rebbes who is, it's unbelievable. There's so much to learn from it. It is a little, some people find it a lot, but there's so much to learn from it.
It's a little spicy to add something like that to the Sefer, but anyone familiar with Aryeh Levanon or the examples that we've been giving so far would not be surprised. You talk about Yukasil Gordon's letter with Ramchal.
Right, he says how we're it's right by Shavuos time. We know that the Beis Yosef had a Magid with Mishnah. Right, you look through Magid Mesharim. He talks about all the Giluyim that he had. Or Yukasil Gordon, the one who brought out the Ramchal's Torah to the wider world. He says how he had a Magid from Shemayim, and hold on to your chair. He says that he was in medical school in Padua, and he wanted to go to learn the whole day. The Magid from Shemayim told him to go to stay in medical school. So that's really unbelievable. And we bring Chaim Vital and Sefer Chazyonis and what Reb Shmuel Arbach had to say about the Sefer Chazyonis. We bring about Shis Alfi Shnin Havi Alma. The world's going to be the shitas that hold it's literal, that in a few hundred years the world's going to be destroyed. Or we bring a very interesting story from Yaakov Kamenetsky. There's also many Balpeh, there's many shmuos from Moshe Feinstein and Yaakov Kamenetsky and many other gedolim. And I'll just give a little example. There's two live gedolim. I'll bring out two of the live rabbis that we bring. There's Reb Hershel Schachter and Reb Shemaya Morgenstern. So people find that a little hard. So let me just deal with that. I'm a Lakewood boy. Reb Hershel Schachter, he says Hal and Yom Ha'atzmaut. I'm never going to do that. And Reb Shemaya Morgenstern, his Chumas and Tchina are Keser, Bina, and Das, and everything's going on over there. I'm not either doing that. But why does that mean that we have to lose out their fascinating Torah? So we try to bring from everyone what we could, and it definitely makes a very, very interesting read.
Yeah, I see here, you quote the Klonimus and Evan Beichen, where he says, and he talks about, it's a very satire. Actually, listen to the latest episode of Auction Chatter I did for the Kastenbaum auction with Moshe Maimon. We discussed, Moshe read this, and he talked about this piece from Evan Beichen, for those that go back and listen there. So really a lot of fascinating Marmakimis. What was it like compiling this? I know you said you didn't use as a chachma other things, and you did it, juggling your family. But what was it like compiling this and putting this together? So
it's really just tons of hard work, and even more siyat d'shmaya. It did take a few years, and Alizayas did a phenomenal job. And it's really just piecing it together, and as we said, taking a lot of things out. And there's just sometimes a sefer, like, it just gets boring. It's like the same type of things over and over. Here you're thrown from one shtickle is a misnagdish piece, the next thing is a chassidish piece, that the misnagdim don't have it just goes back and forth, and it's bound to keep you keep you very occupied. In Parshas Vayikra, bring from Lapyan in the middle of a shmooze. He says there was a Vayveheshev Sagzela Shegazal. There's a Bachar in Velazhin. He wanted someone else's sefer. He wanted to keep it, so he was mazik it. Or he burnt it, I forgot exactly what it's, and he was kind of peshino, and then he was able to keep it. Like, there's just so much going on, and drushes from Gedali Yisrael. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, who said that there was a whole asifa about tefillin that were written by Goyim, so they said everyone has to buy new tefillin. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky said, no, you don't have to, if you can't afford it, then you don't have to buy tefillin. We have tons of things on Lashon Hara, many things that you will not find in any contemporary Likut Svarim, guaranteed. And there's just many, many interesting things about this.
So, who would you say the sefer is? I don't know what the word is meant for, but who will enjoy the sefer?
I think I'll be first to admit, not everyone. I have a brother-in-law who's a real Talmud Chacham, Shas Peskim, but he just learns every week. There's a Parsha, Rashi, and Ramban, and that's it. He's completely not interested, and that's totally fine. If we go Gedolim wise, I think Moshe Feinstein would completely not be interested. Shmuel Auerbach would be very interested. And we go through all the different pulmosin throughout the day. We try to mention. We discuss at length Victor Miller and the Holocaust. Reb Chaim Noah to his Talmud about there's in the beginning of Vayikra. There's one of the first pieces about. There's a famous Degel Machne Ephraim. He says that the Misnagdim, whatever they learn, it's more to be they're bigger by themselves. It's more gaiva. So we have a letter that was never published before from Chaim Noah, who talks about how he tells his Talmud, don't be like your friends the Misnagdim lach who they talk such big lashenis in Limud Torah. The Sheikhet from Berditchev, Reb Arler Belzer, the whole. Thing about how he said that it's going to be good in Europe. We discussed that. Reb Cook, is there going to be our vegetables going to be brought for Kabbanos? Reb Amram Bloy and the Geiris. We bring a lot of early Svarim debates with the church from Yosef Makana and all those type of Svarim. But again, the main thing we have to emphasize this again. The main thing is the learning. And that's definitely the main point. And all the other ones are just l'rakachas, l'tabachas, l'oifis, as the Rambam says. But there's a tremendous amount to be learned. And these things are just not quoted. A Taz that explains the Tzaras Mam Eres, we bring in Parshas Azriah. So the Shach in the middle of Yeridea explains that. So we try to bring that out, what the Paiskim and what the Gedolei Olam have to say on the Psukim.
You also give a daily shir, a podcast. You want to tell listeners about that?
Yeah, so that became, Baruch Hashem, pretty popular last instance. So it actually started basically when the Sefer was finished. So it doesn't really have to do with the Sefer, but many people enjoy it daily. I guess it goes back to back with a lot of stuff that I discussed here. So then you could call in 732-401-3993, or you could subscribe by email, shalshala613@gmail.com. And we discussed as you mentioned before, the authenticity of many Svarim. And is that person? We have a very interesting piece about the Sifsei Chachamim. Was he one of the Gedolei Adar or not? What numerous Gedolim had to say about it. One of the okay, we'll leave that for the Sefer. But there's countless things. You'll get so much smarter about many, many Svarim and many aspects of Jewish literature.
The Sefer is now available. I'll put a link in the show notes. You can get it in the farm stores. You can get it at Alizayas with free shipping. Can they get it from you if they want?
Yeah, so if you're in Lakewood, you can get it from me a little cheaper, 732-600-6338. And yeah, so far, we had it for a day so far, and people are converging and getting it. I put it over Shabbos in my local shul, and people were just addicted, and people are really, really enjoying it. So I hope you will too. I'll
put that information in the show notes for those interested. And listen, you should celebrate Adirei Torah. It's coming out Adirei Torah next week. Adirei Torah, Sefer Name Adirei Torah. I had people, when I posted on this, people were like, what is this Adirei Torah? I had to write a follow-up in the chat. Like, it's not Adirei Torah related. It's not, different book. So totally no connection. And so...
But the name, Aryeh Alvanon, was before Louis Shiner ever dreamt of supporting Lakewood. And a good friend of mine actually told me that he thinks of me on Tisha B'Av.
Look at that. So, and you said Aryeh Alvanon. First, I think I forgot to ask you, why did you pick the name Adirei Torah for this one?
So Aryeh Alvanon we picked, what was that, 4 years ago almost? And this if you say Kinas on Tisha B'Av, this naturally goes after. Yeah, we're already working on Balatrisin. There's a lot of stuff there. And so I guess that was a natural thing. Also, the name goes pretty good. So I guess that was a natural choice.
Okay. So I'll link and put the information in the show notes. And thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.